The rules of this challenge are simple. We'll randomly select building materials using a custom-designed Terraria wiring system. Each chest selected will contain a limited selection of materials that we can take with us onto the final challenge. Once our materials have been chosen, we'll spend a short time in the paint booth where we can experiment with our materials and select 3 colors of paint to bring with us to the final build. In the final part of the challenge, we'll build something awesome in a new Terraria world using only the materials we've been given. Welcome to the party, ladies and gentlemen. We're here with our 6th installment of the Let's Build Roulette challenge, and we are kicking today's episode off just like always. We're going to be selecting 2 chests at random here for our furniture sets. Let's zip ahead and see which ones we get today. In today's episode, we've been given the marble furniture set and the lizard furniture set. In the block round, we're going to be selecting 3 chests at random, and from each chest we'll be allowed to take 2 different blocks for a total of 6 altogether. So let's zoom ahead here to let our mechanism run and let us know which blocks we have to choose from today. In today's episode, we're going to be taking the mudstone brick and desert fossil from the first chest, cogs and solar fragment block from the second, and pine tree block and copper ore from the third. In the wall selection round, we're again going to be selecting 3 chests at random, and we'll be allowed to take 2 different walls from each of those chests. We'll set up the mechanism here for our randomization, let her run through and see what we're choosing today. In today's challenge, we'll be taking Cloud Wall and Flesh Block Wall from the first chest, Arcane Rune Wall and Tin Plating Wall from the second, and finally Grinch Finger Wallpaper and Demonite Brick Wall from the third. The decoration round in this challenge today will be a little bit different than usual. Rather than choosing 1 chest at random and taking 3 items from that 1 chest, we're instead going to be selecting 3 chests and selecting 1 item from each. So we'll take the best item from each of these chests once our mechanism finishes up here. For today's build, our 3 decorations of choice will be the Ichor Campfire, the Queen Statue, and the Solar Monolith. Let's head into the paint booth and figure out what paints we're going to be using for today. Since we took the Solar Monolith as one of our decorations, I already kind of had an idea of what we wanted to do for our paint, so today's paint booth is pretty short. We're going to be taking deep orange, deep yellow, and brown paint. Let's zip ahead to the final build. So I started by placing the Solar Monolith down just so we get the background and sort of our ambiance set in place here while we build. I went ahead and found a Crimson Desert that we could clear out and level a long stretch of flat ground. So we went through, dug out all of this, and as I said in the paint booth, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do already. The Solar Monolith gives a really nice orange and sort of blood moony kind of vibe almost. So lots of oranges and reds and browns. And so I really wanted to run with that idea. And what I did here was basically just ran as quick as I could and just placed blocks behind me to leave a few gaps in them. And just kind of broke up the ground a little bit with some of our unpainted copper ore. So I wanted to add in some trees into this build and really do a nice bit of like sort of landscaping. Maybe took some inspiration from, I don't know, kind of like a Lorax inspired kind of thing, like Dr. Seuss sort of deal here with the stripes on the trees. And kind of just the otherworldly, unnatural sort of look. So I used the solar fragment blocks for the leaves in addition to some copper ore mixed in to just kind of break up the texture and give it a little bit more depth. This took a little while to sort of dial in, and it usually does for me. Especially with random materials, you kind of have to figure out what blocks look good together and what ones don't. I pretty quickly realized that we didn't have any walls that sort of painted into like a sort of a mid-tone orange, and so we had this really stark contrast between the very bright colors of the cloud wall and some of the darker walls that we chose. So I just kind of ran with it and figured I'd sort it out later once we had the rest of the leaves in place. So I went through and added the top bit of the tree here, and this tree design's inspired sort of by Gandalf Hardcore's tree building style. I've been watching some of his videos lately, and if you haven't seen him, check him out. I'll leave a link in the description. But yeah, he's got some really fantastic trees, and I love the way that he designs them, so I sort of took some inspiration from that. I really took my time here on this and sort of played with actuation and the depth involved here to try to get a really nice 3D look on these trees. It turned out okay. Like I said, like the block choices are always tough because we don't really get to choose what we're using. But I think overall they turned out pretty nice. Sometimes the best thing to do with these is just to cover the tree in actuators and sort of individually click each one to figure out what looks good pushed into the background, which blocks look good standing in the foreground. So once I was happy with the top bit there, basically did the same thing to the side that was already made, just so that we could try to bring some of those colors out and give it that sense of depth that you really want out of the leaves of a tree. Once I was relatively happy with where we were at, I went ahead and started on the third branch, again using the solar fragment blocks for the bulk of the leaves, and mixing in some copper ore as we went along. I found that the cloud wall painted deep orange looks really nice as the highlights, like we were talking about, and I really tried to use that to bring out some contrast between the different layers of the trees. So a little bit of hammering, a little bit of clouds here and there to brighten up those edges. And we pretty much had this tree where we wanted to be with it. So fill out some of the background bits here, and then we move on to our actual building. For the building here, I wanted to bring in some of the deep yellow paint that we brought along, and so we used cloud wall with the deep yellow paint to get sort of the primary wallpaper inside of the house. I used the demonite brick to make a real short, narrow roof here, and then quickly moved on to decorating. The wall layout and design of this building wasn't particularly interesting. I just used sort of the same tactics that I usually use and filled it out with some decorations. On the left side, I wanted to put another tree, and I really wanted to bring out that otherworldly feel. So again, I used the pine tree blocks as sort of a border for the tree trunk, and made this one look a little bit different, a little bit more wild, give it a little bit more character and personality, having the sort of split trunk with one limb in the foreground and one in the background. I wasn't really sure how well this was going to turn out, and I spent a lot of time here kind of just thinking about whether or not this was going to look right. And I thought we'd at least give it a go and see how it turned out. I wanted this one to look sort of like the same species of tree as the one on the right side, and so again we added the solar fragment blocks into the tree trunk as sort of these like stripes or rings of like moss or alien goop. I don't know what you want to look at it as, but we tossed some of those around the foreground tree trunk just to give it a little bit more personality and bring out a little bit of contrast in the build. If you haven't noticed by now, I don't normally like building in what you'd probably see as like the traditional Terraria style, where it's just wood and shingles or stone and brick or things like that. I really like bringing out high visibility, high contrast colors in the build. So I expanded our little foundation for our building here, and then decided it would look nice if there's like maybe a little lean-to here on the right side, sort of partially shadowed by the tree. Just a place that you could sit and hang out around the campfire, I guess. So we used the pine blocks again, pine tree blocks, to sort of do the walls on that, and then just left the rest of it open as just background walls. I think it turned out looking really nice. I finally ended up jumping in. I sort of procrastinated a bit on putting the leaves into the trees because it really is a time-consuming thing, and it's definitely a challenge for me still. I don't do this nearly as fast as some other builders I know, so I was kind of dreading putting the leaves on this one after having spent so much time on the first one on the right. But once we had the lean-to in, I decided it was the right time to go, so we put some of the same tactics into play for the tree on the left side. And then I mostly just actuated the limb that's in the background, but I did still want to give it some detail. And again, like I said, this would have been a great place for us to have some sort of mid-shade oranges to sort of sit in the middle of being this super bright cloud wall and being this super dark actuated blocks. But we worked with what we had and did our best to try to figure out what looked best here. And I sort of paused to think about whether or not this was going to work. I sort of trimmed down some of the branches to give this a little bit more of an illusion of depth. And ultimately, this is what we ended up with. And I gotta say, I think this is probably my favorite build so far. I need to turn off spawning here, just so we're not harassed by the mobs while we talk about our build. But yeah, this is definitely one of my favorites that I've done for this challenge. Like I said, the one thing that I do sort of regret is maybe not taking a sort of mid-tone orange background wall or something that would paint to a mid-tone. Because yeah, the contrast on these tree leaves is pretty out there. It's very, very bold. And I would have loved to have something that was maybe somewhere between these two colors on this tree to really sell that illusion of depth. But I think it turned out pretty good. The highlights of the trees with that cloud wall did turn out pretty cool. And like I said, I like building in high contrast, really like saturated color schemes in Terraria. I don't know what it is. I just get bored with your regular old wooden builds or your stone and brick builds. So I really like just bringing loads of color into this. And since we had the option of taking the solar monolith, I thought it was really the best thing that we could do, is just run with this orange and brown, bits of yellow color scheme. So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. We did get some of the lizard furniture inside along with our marble furniture. The monoliths aren't exactly a part of the build, but of course with the background, I think the background is just as much a part of the build as the build itself. So I think that counts just fine for us. We got our statues inside and we got our campfires outdoors. And yeah, like I said, I think this is a pretty cool one. This was definitely different. This is one of the more out there builds I've done in a while, so I'm pretty happy with it. I really, really like this, and I hope you guys do too. If you guys aren't subscribed to the channel already, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button so you can see these things when they come out. If you like Let's Plays for Terraria and stuff like that, we do those here as well. And if you guys are on Twitter as well, you can find me on there. I post updates and things like that if I'm not going to get a video out in time, or if I'm looking to do like a poll or something. I'll post on Twitter just to keep you guys informed. So go follow me on there, do all that good stuff, like the video if you enjoyed it. And yeah, leave me a comment below. Let me know what you guys think. I really, really enjoyed this, and I hope you all did too. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and we'll see you next time.